to whoever's watching this. I want to work a little bit on Recompose. And Recompose you can find in this repository pocmo/recompose. It's a little tool that can convert Android layouts in XML to Kotlin code using Jetpack Compose. And I want to add a little bit more features, I guess. It started as a kind of proof of concept, a hacky project, and there are a bunch of XML views that you need to support if you want to use this seriously. And I want to see how far I can push it. And what makes me super happy is that, what you can see here, a couple of people started contributing to this. So that's fun. And yeah, so let me just show you what it does, I guess. So this is Android Studio. I will work in Android Studio and IntelliJ today, and whenever you see the IDE with the light theme, that's Android Studio, and if you see this IDE with the dark theme, that's actually IntelliJ. So in IntelliJ we will write the code for Recompose, which is, by the way, a tool that you can install as a plugin in Android Studio or run on the command line. And we are working on the code here in IntelliJ, and in Android Studio we will test it or write compose code just to test things out. And so yeah, let's show it. So you can see this test function here. It's composable. Currently it's just displaying this image, and I already installed the plugin here. And I open this layout. It's a constraint layout rendering this face here. I copy all of that code, go back to my test method and paste it. You can see now it's all Kotlin code. I refresh view here on the right. Should show a preview. Let me make it smaller. It looks exactly like this constraint layout that we had here. So that's a feature. And right now it supports a limited set of views and a limited set of attributes for those views. And the idea is to just extend it. And on the way, learn about Compose and learn about the internals of some of the views we have been using all this time. So there's one issue I already looked at that I think is a great candidate for today. That's adding support for CheckBox. A bunch of links here I'm going to open. And this will touch all areas of the code base. We will need to parse the XML for a checkbox. We need to translate it into a data class that is holding all the data about a checkbox we care about, and then we need to write the code that translates from this data class to the actual Compose code. And then, since Compose is quite new and I haven't worked that much with it actually, I need to figure out how actually the checkbox in Compose works. And yeah, so let's maybe start by going to Android Studio and actually adding a checkbox here and see how this works. And if you have any questions, just put them into the chat and I'm happy to answer them. So apparently I imported the view, which is not what I want here. Let's quickly check the link I opened. So it's checkbox with a lowercase b, and here it is. So let's see, what do we need? We seem to be required to provide a checked boolean, and it looks like the onCheckChange method is also. Let's create an empty lambda here. It's not red. Refreshing the preview. Let's see. Yeah, awesome. There's a checkbox here. Let's see if we make this interactive. We can click it, but since we do not implement onCheck changed, nothing happens except for the highlighting. All right, looks good. The first thing I'm wondering is there a text property here? Doesn't look like. Let me actually go into the code. No, it looks like this is only the checkbox, which probably makes sense in Compose. But if we go back to the view usually comes with the text, I think, which in XML also makes sense. Yeah, it inherits text view. Since I guess you want to click the text as well, right? And toggle the checkbox. So we need to figure out how to do this. If we translate the checkbox just into this snippet, then the text is obviously missing. So maybe this here. I saw this nice blog post, which we could maybe quickly check out. And maybe there are some examples that make sense. So it's about the state handling. Doesn't seem to mention text at all. Search text, no. So I assume we need to compose our own composable by combining maybe a row. Let's try this. A row with a text. Hello world. Yeah, I mean the text is not aligned perfectly, so that's maybe something we should fix, but it is a good starting point. If we see a checkbox in XML, we translate it into this snippet. I see some people joined, so I'm working on Recompose. It's a tool that can translate Android layouts in XML to Kotlin code using Jetpack Compose. And I want to add support for checkboxes. And this issue. And I'm currently in Android Studio trying to figure out what is actually the equivalent compose code that we would write if we want to have a checkbox that looks kind of like the checkbox we would see if we use the checkbox XML element. And yeah, since checkbox doesn't have a text, I assume we need to combine checkbox and text in a row. And maybe at some point also make text clickable, but I leave this for later. So let's look at the Recompose code. So I guess we start by creating a test file. Since we do not want to run the plugin all the time and copy and paste code all the time, this is super annoying. So let's create a quick test case. Actually, let's do this in Android Studio because here we have better support for layouts. Let's turn this whole thing into a checkbox and wrap content. Some text. And then let's also make it checked. And that's maybe a good starting point for us. We want, of course, with an 8, text and checked. And the other attributes we look at later. The nice thing is some of the attributes from a view like layout, width, and height. We do not need to care about this. The code, we will see this later, will take care of those attributes that are in every view. But that's our little test case, and we want to translate this into Compose code. And yeah, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat, and I will stop and try to answer them. All right, so this is our test. There are two interesting tests I guess we could look at. One is the parser test. If we look at some examples in here. So from XML we parse, we create 3 of those, or we create this layout object which contains a tree of child nodes, and they also can have children. And we'll get some examples. They can be quite verbose if there are a lot of things in the XML. Like here, this is probably a nice small example. Text view absolute DP sizes, if I open this quickly. So this is little text view with height and text. We translate it into a layout that contains a list with only a text view node with the width and height, and the text color is null in this case since it's not specified. And we can do the same now for our checkbox. Let's write a test. Basic checkbox. And then let's pass the checkbox XML file. And then we expect a layout with a bunch of nodes that we do not have yet. There's no checkbox node yet. So let's quickly run this, and then we can see the output. So of course it failed. We expected an empty layout, but we got a layout that contains an unknown node, which is maybe confusing at first. We also pass nodes we do not know what they are, because we add them into the composable code as comments. So if you let's look at the test. This here, for example, you have a custom view. We can't translate this into Compose because we do not know what it is, right? We could, in this case, call an awesome view composable, but there's no guarantee that this actually exists. So what we do right now is, and for that we can look at the composer test. No. The unknown here. So just look at this snippet here. We create a comment, maybe this one, because that's the same file, awesome view. We create a comment that contains this awesome view composable that the user might or might not write for the custom view. And then we create all the other things like the modifiers here that we got from the XML, because we do understand width and height even for a custom view. So that's why this one gets passed into, you can see here, an unknown node. So if we would look at the composable code, there would be a checkbox composable but commented out. So almost there. So let's make sure we pass this. So let's look at the parser. And let's keep that. This code again. So this is the when block that maps XML element names to the parsing function. And you can see that's the small subset we support so far. So there's a bunch of code to write. So let's add something for the checkbox. If we are using XML pull parser in here, and let's quickly check. It's a capital B, right? Yeah, the view has a capital B, the composable not. Okay. And those methods here that we are calling, those are just extension methods on XML pull parser class. So we have separate files for those. So what we need to write now is function that takes in, or that returns a checkbox node. So the data class is holding the data for one of those elements. They are always called like the view and node added to it. Node because they are like organized like a tree. And before we can implement this, let's actually create a checkbox node. So this is in this AST for abstract syntax tree module. And let's create a checkbox node here. Data class checkbox node. If you look at some of the other nodes, let's open text view. You can see there's this view attributes class, and this is a class that is a holder basically for all the attributes that every view has. So or can have, and currently those are in here, and of course we need those in our checkbox too. And the nice thing is, as I mentioned before, if we use this view attributes, we have a generic way of parsing those, so we do not need to parse all those attributes for every node. And we need to extend the node interface. And the node interface requires us to implement one more method. And maybe let's look at this method later. So we have a checkbox node. It can hold view attributes, but we need to keep more, right? We decided if we go to our test example, we want the text and the checked state at least for now. So let's keep those two. Hey, Anis, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. That's the awkward part of streaming. Whenever someone enters the chat, I have no clue how to pronounce the names. And yeah, thank you for contributing to this project. I saw you also open PRs. That's awesome. Text and checked state, yeah. So a string and a boolean. Now we can import this here. So how do we parse this? We can borrow code again. If we close this, go back to our parsing method. If you look at text view again, like view attributes, we only need to call the extension method for that. So if we return the checkbox node here, this will already give us the view attributes. So now we only need the text and the boolean. And those we can just get from the XML pull parser. So if we say the text, get attribute value, we pass in null as a name, as a namespace, because we have set up the XML pull parser to ignore namespaces and not check them. So we need to now define inside the name that we want to use Android text. This will give us the text. It can be null So I think we didn't design for this here. This needs to be nullable, and the checked state is actually interesting because the checkbox, of course, if we use it in XML, cannot have a checked attribute, but the checkbox itself still needs to have a default value checked, because it needs to render one of the two states. So let's see if this is somewhere defined in the docs, what the default is. Where? Okay, this is not part of checkbox. It's probably in compound button. Let's see. It's checked. Okay, no docs at all. All right. Let's say somewhere over here. Compound button attributes. Checked indicates the initial checked state. Yeah, I assume it's unchecked by default, so I guess we go with that, but we do this here in the parser, so checked get attribute value Oh, I did pronounce it correctly. That's great. Let's add the text here. And checked, we need to translate this into a Boolean. Do this over here, Boolean parse. Wouldn't there be a parse method on the, we do this here, to Boolean. Does this do, if this is not a Boolean? Yeah, calls parse Boolean on a Boolean class. Seems to return false, everything that is not true. Let's verify this. Let's create a scratch file or Kotlin. So let's create value value to Boolean, so this should be false. Okay, make this nullable, and now if we set it to null, it's false. Okay, that's great. So we use to Boolean here, pass this in here, and yeah, should be everything we need for the checkbox. Over here, let's copy the license header over. And we go to the checkbox. Let's write a quick comment, passes a checkbox. And let's throw in a link to the docs that might be helpful at times. Go back to checkbox here. Okay, so that should be everything for the parser. So let's pass on our test. But still fail because we defined as an empty list here. But we can see there's a checkbox node here. So let's write what we actually expect here. We expect a checkbox node. It should have view attributes. Width and height. Let's see, what did we define here? Match parent and wrap content. So this should be match parent. This should be wrap content. The text should be, is it hello world? Yeah. Hello world. And the checked state should be true. Yeah, true. Okay, let's run this. Right, passes. Awesome. So now we can pass a checkbox and we get a checkbox node. Now step 2 is translating a checkbox node into a composable code. So let's again start with the test. And this is one of the only projects where I actually do kind of test-driven development, because it's so easy here to see, okay, those are my inputs and I exactly know what my outputs are. So it's easy to write the test up front. Again, we use as the file name our checkbox XML, and then here we define a composable code we expect. So let's run this and we will see probably fail. This time with an actual error because, yeah, we don't know what to do. And this will bring us to the method that we ignored last time. We are here. Also copy the license header into this new file. That's it. So the composer that takes this tree of nodes and translate it into composable code is implemented as a visitor using the visitor pattern. So we need to tell or add to the interface a visit function for our new node with a checkbox. And then need in this accept method call this okay. This is one step further. Now we will see another compile error, and this is our composing visitor. That is the class that actually translates the nodes. So let's add one for checkbox here. And now let's tell our code how to translate this. And there are two things that we are using here. One is this writer. That's a little helper that writes Kotlin code for us. So for example, here above in the text view, we say, okay, we want to write a function call to a function called nameText, and it needs a bunch of parameters. And this writer will take care of, okay, how do I actually write Kotlin code that does this? The internals are not super nice right now. At some point this needs to be nicer, but it works. It is fine. So let's start with modifiers. This is modifier builder that will look at the node and will create all the modifiers for this composable code. Like if we back to Android Studio, like if we go to the checkbox here, there's always this modifier attribute, right? And then you can do define the width. And this builder that we defined. By default, if you just pass in the node, will do this for all the attributes it detects that are common in all the views, like the width, and will know how to translate them to the modifiers. Also complicated then. So I showed the example above here where we translate this into text, which is quite straightforward, right? A text with a bunch of parameters. We need to translate the checkbox into this, which is a little bit more complicated. But let's start with the row. So we want to have a row and also need some parameters. And first, the modifiers that we found, we need to translate them into the parameters for this row function. Since if we saw in the checkbox a width, like we find here, this of course needs to not be here on the actual checkbox, it needs to be here. We write a row with the modifiers we found. Then inside, we write another call that is the checkbox. Box. As parameters, it needs the checked state and unchecked changed. So let's and let's format this differently. This. And checked, and let's see, we need a call parameter with name checked, and the value will be, in this case, just, so there are different types of parameters because sometimes they can be a little bit more complicated where we need to also translate the parameters, but here we can just use a raw value because we only need to write true or false here. And I think right now we only accept ints and strings here, so let's add another way of taking in a boolean. Can turn it into a string here. We do not actually care about the boolean value at this point anymore. As in node.checked. And then we need another one. This is called unchecked change. And the value for now will just be an empty value, empty lambda. We have a type for it here. Okay, this should give us the row and the checkbox. Now let's add the text as well. Another call inside the row. Name is text. Parameters, list of, and this is just a text. And this time I think we will skip the named argument. So we will not write text equals hello world because that is, I think, obvious in a text node what this is. So we skip this. So we create a call parameter and just ignore the name and set the value immediately. And this is a string value. It's not a raw value because if he would use a raw value, it would look like this. We need to actually write it as a string, which means like put it into quotation marks. And we use node text. Now there's a problem here. Node text is nullable. And we wouldn't want to write something like this, right? This is like super weird. And it even explodes here. So we only should do this if the node is not actually, the text is not. And, oh yeah. Now it's complaining because the smart cast is not possible here, since the node is not defined in this Gradle module. It can't trust it that it might not have changed in between. Write it as this. Because if the text is empty, you can skip the whole node. It doesn't make sense like this, and it doesn't even compile, and it would also not make sense as this, and this does also not compile. So in this case, we just edit as this checkbox. We could leave out the row in this case, I guess, but I don't think that makes sense, does it? Maybe not for now. I think in most situations we actually expect a text. In situations where we have a bunch of parameters, we can also make this nullable. So we could have written something like this. And the right call code is smart enough to know, okay, if this is actually a null parameter, I will just skip this. But in this case, we skip the whole right call code. So let's run our test and see what it does. Of course it fails because we say it should translate to an empty string right now. Now what happens? So this is what our code wrote. A row with the modifier fill max width, because in the XML it was match parent, so that makes sense. It's check true, on check change as an empty lambda for now, and it has text hello world. So this looks good. So let's copy this and drop this into our test function here. See how this looks like in Android Studio. Yeah, I think that is actually nice. We could maybe try fixing the alignment here. We want this text to, I guess, be vertically aligned, centered. If you look at this example, it's definitely centered. Also has an interesting heading we might want to emulate at some point, but for now let's maybe center the text. Also different size, but I don't think we care about this detail. Let's maybe center it at least so that it doesn't look so weird. Let's see, can we do this with the modifier as well? Gravity is deprecated, has been renamed to align. Okay. Align. Vertical, no. Alignment. Vertical. Center, no. Center vertical. What does this look like? Yeah, I think that looks better. Compare this. There's like here kind of margin or padding. But that's something for the next new issue to file. I think this is already a nice translation. Definitely better than not translating the checkbox. So let's do this as well. Switch to IntelliJ. Back to our composer. We'll just drop it into the editor as a comment so that we see it. Let's see. I think we did this before, right? Oh, here we use text align. Oh wait, text align is also an option here. I guess this is only aligning it inside its own box, but let's test. Text align. No. Okay, so back. Let's see, how do we do this? We have a parameter value that could implement this. Yeah, we need to create a modifier for this. And this is probably the first time we actually need. The first time we actually need to do something with the builder, not only take the defaults. So let's first rename this into. This is the row modifier. And then inside here, a text modifier. And let's see. I guess we need to change how we do this. Right now, this always takes a node. In this case, we do not actually want to pass in a node. So maybe make this nullable. Let's see how this will work. And we only add the view modifiers if we have a node. If node 9. And let's see, we can add the modifier, we can add a size. Let's see, I don't remember the details. Okay, modifier has a name and also can have a list of parameters and an optional lambda. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so the name is align. And then we need a parameter, alignment center vertically. Can guess again use a raw value here because we exactly know the string that needs to be inserted here. This. Oh yeah, a call parameter without a name, and yeah, write exactly this code. And test again. Didn't add anything to the text because we created text modifier, but we do not actually use it. Need to add it as a parameter to text as well. Can now take the text modifier and say translate this into a call parameter. Lots of French words if you say them. Okay, so this looks like this. We have a text and it has a modifier and modifier line center vertically. It is in here. Let's see how preview looks like. Yeah. Now the text is centered vertically. I think that makes sense. Let's copy this into our test. Expect this code to come out of it. We already know it does, so the test should pass here. All right. So let's make sure we didn't break anything, and let's run all the composer tests. Okay, all passed. So the same with the parser. On all the tests. Okay, all green. Awesome. So let's switch to a shell. Okay, can you do this? Yeah. Okay, let's look at the code we wrote. Bunch of files. Well, actually, before we look at the code, let's let Kotlin format it. Okay, now let's run Kotlin and detect to see if there's any they don't like in our code. Yeah. Composing visitor. Too many functions. That is definitely true. But this is kind of expected with the visitor pattern. So for now, kind of ignore it here. There's definitely an opportunity to make this here nicer, but I don't think we will reduce the number of functions. So let's run this again. Okay, they are happy. Let's one more time run all the tests. All right. And now let's take one last look at the code. The checkbox node class looks like we could a quick comment. Bye. Okay, I can't search. Okay, then I need to open the file by hand. AST checkbox node. Data class holding the past checkbox. And then let's also drop in the link. It's easy to get to the docs if we need to add more things here. Okay, let's look at this again. This is the visitor. We added the visit function for the checkbox. The composing visitor, where we do the translation. And modifier builder. Modifier builder we needed to change because we want to use it without a node as well. The new Boolean raw value, the test for our composer. Parse checkbox now. This is the function that actually does the parsing. This is the test for the parser, and this is our test case. Great. Let's commit this. Take another look at the number. It's issue number 63. Issue 63. Add basic support for checkbox. Push this. Oh, I almost pushed to the main branch. Of course, we want to do this on a branch. Open a pull request. This will run all the CI, and yeah, I expect it to be green because we run the test, detect Kotlin, so, and then we can match it. So, 57 minutes. I think that's good. So, if anyone is now interested in contributing, go ahead, either file issues, pick one of the issues. I labeled one with good first issue or help wanted. Big thank you again to those people that already contributed. That's pretty awesome. It's a fun little project to learn about Compose or Vue XML without writing a bunch of UI. And yeah, if another thing that would be awesome is if you have layout files that you want to share. I'm interested in getting more real-life test cases. Then I can drop them into the repo and figure out what's missing, file issues for that, and slowly make the tests pass for this, for those donated layouts, basically. Yeah, so thank you to everyone who watched, and if you like this, please follow, and I hope to do this again. Yeah, let me know if there are things you want to see. Thank you very much. Bye bye.